Peace, everyone. Welcome to another installment of Music No Industry. My name is Aquil. We are here in my makeshift studio, and this show is titled Who Started Hip Hop? Now, I've been seeing this trending recently on social media, especially Twitter, and due to some people that I consider to be drifters promoting this dissension between people in the African diaspora of who originated hip hop, who was there when it first started, who takes credit for what. And I have a take on this issue, being that my blog is about hip hop. I'm a music artist that predominantly does hip hop. And, I was raised in the music culture, the music that helped create the culture that is hip hop, or help formulate and express the culture that is hip hop. So, with that said, I find it interesting that, everyone says, black people from America started hip hop, or people from the Caribbean started hip hop, or Latinos started hip hop, or they were there. And I find this to be frivolous, but for the record, let's just make it plain, blunt, and clear. Everyone, if you don't know the story of 1156 Cedric, I believe that's the street. If I'm not, I'll have it correct with the image. Hip hop was started formally with DJ Kool Herc, playing records in the park to help, quell community violence, to help organize people that were impoverished in New York City. But the records, and DJ Kool Herc comes from Jamaica, with, the sound selector, the DJs from Jamaica creating their innovative sound system so that they could play louder than their opponents when they would have competitions. But make no mistake about it, the music that he was playing and that he was influenced by was not only from Jamaica, it was from the States. James Brown, soul records from Gamble and Huff, the soul records from Philly International, the soul records from Watt Stax, soul records from Motown. You can go on and on and on, and we can go to the origin, really, which is African music, which then, because of the mass enslavement of black people, came to America. They tried to squash our culture, but we still retained it subconsciously, and it came out in many ways. Then you have the influence of what was ragtime, which became jazz, which was formerly said to start in New Orleans. Which was inspired by African people who also were influenced by their former colonizers, so the French and the Spanish, who were also inspired by us. But that is to say that you go from jazz to blues to rock to funk. You have several iterations of jazz. So you have, we have the so-called classical jazz, which jazz, funny, was a derogatory term. It's called jazz and scat. Scat is poop and jazz is jizz, because this music was played inside of brothels. It was considered a low music. And it's funny because to me, I consider jazz to be the greatest music ever created, because just for the simple fact that these people are innovating. They're master musicians, but they're innovating, and it still sounds amazing. And a lot of these jazz records influenced the rock that we created, so-called Black Americans. Then that helped influence create the funk. You have Parliament, James Brown, which helped create the R&B, rhythm and blues, soul, which also all of these things helped create what we call hip hop. So moving on, coming out of what was the poverty of the late 60s and 70s after the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Power movement, where schools were becoming integrated, and just coincidentally, music programs, vocational programs started to be moved out of areas where we so-called black people predominated. A lot of the musicianship was lost. A lot of the musicianship had to be on your spare time or not, via school. So a lot of people, or we innovated and started using records to pretty much create music, scratching and pretty much sampling records, taking old records, taking the break beats or taking the parts that we loved and looping them over and over and over again, mixing them together with other records, blending. From there, you have also, if you talk about hip hop, you have the graffiti, which was said to start in Philadelphia with legendary Cornbread, who has a movie based on him called Cornbread Earl and Me, or loosely based off of him. From there, you have the dancing, break dancing. You have so on and so forth. I don't want to get into the details. I want to make this short and concise. With that said, hip hop is a prime example of Pan-African consciousness. Why do I say that? Because these were African people from the diaspora all over. New York City has is pretty much a magnet for people from all over the world, not just African people or so-called black people from the diaspora. So you have people from Jamaica, people from Barbados, people from Brazil, people from Colombia, people from, you name it, especially us who were brought over here forcefully. So we organized together and created what you call hip hop. It was influenced by all of us. It was influenced, but it started here with our unity. So to harp on, we were started, or it came from here, and there. Yes, it was massively influenced by the experience of African people in the United States. But this international set claiming, this fake gang banging, what set you claim stuff that's corny is whack. It makes no sense. And that ties me into my next point. You could claim it started with us, and I agree, it started with so-called us, meaning so-called black folks from the United States. But who runs hip-hop? Who owns hip-hop? Because last I checked, unless you are signed to a label that is not owned and ran by us, you're not getting played on the radio. You're not going to get major looks. You're not going to get looks in these venues that are run by massive corporations. A lot of them are being bought up by massive corporations. That happened to me in Philadelphia, which I will talk about in another show, where Cornball pretty much tried to block me out of big venues because I saw his cornball ways and was not going for it. But that's another show. So I say that to say, who runs the culture? The culture. Because hip hop is a subculture. People say it's a culture, but it's not a culture. I say it's a culture, but it's really not a culture. It's a subculture. But who runs hip hop? Can we monetize it? Can we take it and do what we want to? Does it really project the image that we want it to project? Because I say no. I mean, anytime that, and I'll talk about this also on another show, you have AI generated artists. Funny, they use hip hop, which is the most popular music, but to generate AI, artificial intelligence generated artists. And first thing they're talking about is drugs and killing and using N words and things like that. And they got colorful dreads and gold teeth. Like, what are they really saying? Who's who? Why? And why are we depicted like that? And how come when anybody has anything that's counterintuitive or counter to the popular narrative of drug selling, of killing, of just blatant derogatory, over-sexualized imagery, that it's corny, it's whack, it's hotep, it's this, is that? Why is that? People claim they hate slave films but love playing the slave roles. The Buck, the Coon, the Mammy, the Jezebel. What's up with that? It doesn't make sense to me. So I say all that to say, who runs the culture? Because last I checked, I did a presentation on this years ago, probably 11 years ago, of who runs the industry. And of all the major labels, it's probably only 3 or 4 of them. None of the top execs were people that could call themselves black, or of the African diaspora, or people that come from the culture that is hip hop. I just had my previous show, I talked about the label that I went to, and that label is not ran by anybody that's black. Now, the person that saw me, that was A&R, I guess, was black, but it wasn't ran by us. So who runs hip hop? Who runs these streaming services? Even Jigga Man, he was a partial owner in Tidal, and he sold it. So who runs the venues? Because back in the days when we were doing the Chitlin circus, yeah, we ran the venues many of the times when we were promoters. Now we don't run these venues, especially in Philly, where I come from, which is a great hub for finding artists. Some of the best artists in the world are from Philly, me being one. But and I don't say that jokingly, but I say it to say, who do you have to answer to get into these venues? Think about it. So who runs the culture? Who runs the media outlets that you have to kowtow and project a certain image to get onto? Think about it. How come you hear this terminology of SoundCloud rapper? You know, anything that is done in an indie format is seen as less than, it's seen as shabby, it's seen as not professional, when really it's the mentality of what other people do is more professional, it's better. So I should give it more respect and validation. You have to be validated by people outside of your culture. Or you have to be validated by the streets. And I'm going to talk about the streets in another show. But I say all that to say, you know, this fake international or this fake nationalism of we started it, when really, okay, yeah, you can say we started it, but who runs it? Do you dictate who gets seen, who gets sold, who gets the tour? I don't think our people even really appreciate the art form. If it's on the radio, it must be hot. If it's getting hundreds of millions of views or hundreds of thousands of views, it must be hot. And numbers lie. Don't get it twisted. I'll talk about that on another show as well. So I don't want to make this too long. I just wanted to say, you know, yeah, hip hop started in the States and is predominantly influenced by people of the African diaspora that are from the United States and were brought here enslaved. And from the jazz, the blues, the rock, the soul, the funk, also the reggae. It was also influenced by people from the Caribbean who came here and unified with us, and we created one of the greatest art forms the world has ever known. I mean, all these art forms are great to me. So one people can't take credit for it. That's just whack. And on top of taking credit for that, do we own it industry-wise? Can we take this and monetize it on our own without the input of any other people? Because last I checked, I would say no. But what do you say? And that's all I have for now on the Music No Industry vlog, show, podcast. I don't like podcasts because that's going to die out in a while. But look out for my new music. Makes Sense is out right now on all streaming platforms. Check it out. It's on YouTube as well as on this channel. And I will see y'all on the next one. Peace.